the extremes, and that it combines the natural genetic diversity with adaptability by targeting projected climate change directions while deliberately buffering against the unpredictability of these projections. Climate adjusted provenancing is highly strategic and pragmatic approach to seed sourcing under the broader umbrella of assisted gene flow, which I'll be discussing next. You can consider this climate adjusted provenancing as something like an evolutionary insurance policy for our forests. In that diagram, what you see there would be the stars, indicate the stars here in these various items. Would this be the site to be revegetated? I'm sorry. For revegetation or for restoration, the green circles would represent the native population. So you have various populations in these various approaches. And then the size of the circle indicates the relative quantities of germplasm included from each population for use of the restoration or revegetation site. So in the case of the climate-adjusted provenancing, the relative quantities of germplasm from the various population will depend upon factors such as genetic risks and the rate of reliability of climate change projection. Now, moving on to the next possible approach, which I've just mentioned also, is the assisted gene flow. And this figure is taken from the publication of Aitken and Bemmels. And this so-called assisted gene flow, or AGF, illustrates the here. What you see here is the I'm sorry, northward movement of individuals, assisted gene flow of individuals. So you're seeing here the climate gradient from the warm to the colder gradient. And you see here the historical range and climate. And you see here how genes sorry for that, mouse is jumping. You see here how the assisted gene flow is employed so that genes are assisted to be transferred from one area to the other, where there is this projected change in climate. So instead of just, what you see here is that instead of just breeding local trees for local forests, scientists now map future climate scenarios. They select seeds from tree population that currently live in the warmer or drier climates and breed them into population where those conditions are expected in the future. So what happens here in AGF is that it introduces climate resilient alleles, or the gene variants, into vulnerable forests. Now, let's shift into something different in terms of future proofing our future forest restoration works. There is this higher level of uncertainty associated with future environmental changes, which we have so far discussed. There are also uncertain societal changes. In fact, we're experiencing it now globally with these disruptions taking place in the Middle East. But there are these societal changes in terms of our needs for our forest and the products and services it provides to us. So we put another dimension into the equation. And authors Messier et al. Labeled this as the functional network complex approach. Now, in this particular conceptual diagram, what you see here are three spatial space in terms of space. Three spatial scales of possible silvicultural intervention in terms of the stand, forest ownership, and the forest landscape. What you see here is that we apply or employ silvicultural practices through forest cutting, enrichment planting, or establishment of new stand, whereby we try to increase both functional diversity and redundancy at the scale of the stand and in terms of forest ownership, resulting in enhanced connectivity, centrality, and modularity in the surrounding forest landscape, so that the resilience of the forest network can be greatly promoted. Now, in this particular approach, you see here a schematic representation of a fictionalized forest landscape before, this is in letter A, and then letter B is the targeted silvicultural intervention. But what you see here, sorry, my mouse is just so sensitive, sorry for that. What you can see here is that we try, just like what I've said, we try to promote the so-called diversity, functional diversity, connectivity, and centrality of the landscapes to the various silvicultural approaches. We don't have much time to discuss them in detail, but in this particular approach, the idea is really trying to enhance this particular functional networks in a particular landscape. And this could be accomplished, of course, through various silvicultural approaches with the help, of course, of diverse forest genetic resources. Now, moving on, I'd like also, we have been seeing that the forest genetic resources is very important here. We have to emphasize that forest genetic resources is very vital. In fact, it's essential and imperative foundation for building up these forest genetic resources. And thus, genetic diversity is very fundamental. And through these years, if I may express my bias being part of AFORGEN, and of course, together with many other institutions like APAFRI, FAO, and other government institutions, non-government institutions, and all the institutions present now in this workshop, are making this clarion call, this urgent call that forest genetic resources conservation and ensuring their genetic diversity, particularly, well, even here in the Asia-Pacific region and globally, are fundamental for what we are discussing in terms of climate resilient forests. Genetic diversity is that invisible foundation of forest survival. And if well, we may see some green forest which might look healthy, but if it lacks genetic variation, it's highly vulnerable to stresses like pests, diseases, droughts, and other changes that climate change could bring about. And therefore, FGR remains to be the so-called biological hardware to provide instructions to allow forests to survive the uncertain environmental stress in the future. So I mentioned here two publications, but of course there are a lot of publications which we can see in many journals and in many forums. But one here is the Genomics and Forest Tree Genetics International Conference held in 2016. And Halliday et al. Explained how modern genomics, where they cited novel researches, allows researchers, practitioners to pinpoint specific adaptive alleles or gene tied to, say, drought or heat tolerance for this particular desired traits. Now, future proofing isn't just about species selection, although species selection is very important. It's also important that we select the right genetic hardware within a species, and thus FGR, diversity and conservation, is very important. The other publication by Graudel et al. Provides a stark warning that human activity, which many of you are familiar with, is rapidly eroding intraspecific genetic diversity. That publication provides great global statistics on why conserving FGR is just as urgent as stopping deforestation. Now, in connection with this, may I mention or site C4 Ecraft 3 Gene Bank. It's one of the 11 CGR gene banks with the mandate to manage the conservation and sustainable use of agroforestry and tree genetic resources, acquire diverse tree germplasm from global partnerships, also to characterize to identify distinct and useful traits, and then ensure that the conserved germplasm is properly curated, viable, and available to users. And I'm sure even your institutions might have similar practices like this. Now, let me shift to the next point in my talk, and that with this global targets that we have, say, for example, the 1 trillion trees, the 1 trillion trees effort that was cited a while ago. I think I missed this portion, but we have these global efforts that we have globally. We have these huge areas to be restored. We are now confronted with another hurdle, and these are the large, enormous hectares of land to be restored. But the question that we have is, where would the planting materials come from? And the ultimate bottleneck now is this native seed supply chain, which of course many of you, especially those restoration practitioners, are experiencing. So regarding this seed system as the ultimate bottleneck, I would like to cite 3 findings, although of course there are several other publications in terms of this seed system as the ultimate bottleneck. One of which is that by Atkinson, which is entitled "The Vital Role of Native Tree Seed in Ecological Restoration." It's a high-level urgent call to action, highlighting that the global push for tree planting, like that of the Bond Challenge and the trillion trees, is practically impossible without massive upgrade to native seed infrastructure. I'm sure many of you, particularly the restoration practitioner, have encountered this huge, tremendous problem when it comes to native seed supply when you're doing your respective restoration work. And of course, our very own Aforgen Rina Yalonen et al. Has published another article basing forest restoration on native tree seed supply chains. It's a major bottleneck for success. And this particular publication highlights the first mile problem. So when we make that first journey, that first step in restoration, we have this first mile problem where the researchers show that many restoration projects fail. Why? Because seeds are collected from too few mother trees, leading to inbred, genetically weak forests that die off years later. The publication, the researchers advocates for strict seed collection protocols to ensure broad genetic bases. The third journal article that I'd like to cite also mentions or focuses on the socioeconomic side of seed system. So it's not just the biological or technical side that we are focusing, but there is the socioeconomic side of the seed systems, where Neff et al. Argued that to future-proof forests, we must professionalize and fund seed collection networks, treating them native seeds or treating native seeds as critical national infrastructures. We know that many collectors are community-based, and a lot of them need to be supported. And thus, it's very important. And I guess Dr. Reka might be touching on some of the capacity building initiatives that India has done. And this would be one of those important initiatives we have to consider. In connection with this, allow me to mention a project by C4 ICRAF on quality tree seed for Africa entitled Improving Access to Quality Tree Seeds to Strong Genetics, Capacity, and Science-Based Restoration. This particular project has three objectives. One is that it focuses on enhancing a tree seed system for ecological restoration and food security by increasing the availability of high-quality, climate-resilient planting material and strengthening supply systems to ensure this material effectively reaches growers in the target regions. Also, the project provides technical capacity support on quality seeds and seedling delivery to community-based organizations, non-governmental organizations, government institutions, and community-based specialists, bridging the tree seed supply gap and enhancing the technical knowledge and skills of producers and users. It implements also so-called climate appropriate portfolios of tree diversity for all kinds of tree planting by delivering mixes of tree species, planting materials that are environmentally matched to planting sites and purpose matched to planting requirements, enabling effective responses to climate change and other challenges that tree planting addresses. Now, in terms of global frameworks and policy directives, may I cite two publications, one by FAO, another by GAN. FAO provides the mandate for incorporating FGR into the national climate adaptation plans. I guess Reka might be covering this in detail in her talk. But GAN talks about the international principles and standards for practice of ecological restoration. This is a publication of the Society of Ecological Restoration, where Principle 4 explicitly mandates the use of genetically appropriate local or climate-matched genotypes in restoration. Another publication, particularly that of FAO, entitled Delivering Free Genetic Resources in Forests and Landscape Restoration, highlights that incorporating diverse tree genetic resources is essential for resilience, productivity, and climate adaptation of restoration projects. Now, let me just share very quickly some useful software tools and apps and softwares, that of seedlot selection tool, diversity for restoration, and my farm trees. I don't have much time to discuss them in detail, but the seedlot selection tool matches seed origin for future climates, and it addresses that assisted gene flow, but it's cover primarily US, Canada, and Mexico. D4R designs diverse species portfolios for specific ecological goals. It's for the tropics, South America, Africa, and Asia. And My Farm Trees track seeds from collection to planting and issues financial incentives. It was piloted in Africa, but right now, the Alliance of Biodiversity International and SIAT is working with Cambodia, Myanmar, and the Philippines and Timor-Leste to customize this app. So in conclusion, to future-proof our forests, we must adopt a three-pillar paradigm. First, we must conserve relentlessly, protecting existing natural forests as our foundational or irreplaceable gene banks. And FLR, Forest Landscape Restoration, emphasizes this in its principle and guiding elements, whereby FLR is trying to promote the restoration of natural forest ecosystems where we could source diverse forest genetic resources. And therefore, it's important that we maintain, conserve both, and preserve forest ecosystems. And second, we must plant adaptively using climate models to mix local seeds with climate-adjusted provenances. There are many available tools now, and more researches and studies are needed to refine and make these tools more accurate and targeted. Third, we must invest heavily in the supply chain, treating native seed collection networks and decentralized nurseries as critical national infrastructures. And there should be this capacity building for local NGOs, communities, government institutions, and other stakeholders who are involved in restoration so that their planting materials are correctly source for the present and future needs of the world. There's just so much work to be done, but with regional and global interests on forest and landscape restoration and with support from many stakeholders like the government, NGOs, civil societies, local communities, the academe, researchers, scientists, young, old, women, more, including you who have joined us today in this workshop. We have more hands working and walking together towards a better and brighter future of having future-proof, climate-resilient forests for sustained ecosystems, goods, and services. With this, I warmly thank you for your kind attention and hand back the virtual platform to Dr. Pin. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Professor Ike. A lot of information there and a lot of efforts to be done for this forest landscape restoration. I think we have time for a couple of questions. I'd like to invite the participant to, if you have any question, you can now ask the questions to Prof. Anyone? It's a very interesting topic. Any question from our participants? Maybe I can start first. According to the last slide, invest in native tree seed supply chain. Prof, what do you think? What do you think the government, the local government, or the forest department can do in this part? What can they invest in this particular in the supply chain, for example? Maybe you can share your thoughts.
Okay. Of course, the supply chain would be very long and there will be a lot of actors that would be involved. But what comes to mind in this particular aspect, first and foremost, would be where the seeds would be coming from, the supply side. And this is where our seed orchards would be very important. I'm sure in many countries in the Asia Pacific region, we have this seed orchard established for priority species. But likewise, in other areas, we have only seed production areas that needs to be developed later to graduate in as seed orchards. But likewise, in other areas, there might be also this natural forest or even good plantations. We have to qualify that not all plantations would be good sources of seeds. But these sources have to be maintained, upgraded in terms of the seed production. Likewise, it's important that the government or other institutions invest on capacity building. That is from the spectrum of production, collection, seed handling, storage, even marketing, selling, and bringing the seeds to restoration users, the target users, are important. We have to capacitate the various actors involved here from this various spectrum so that they would be able to deliver this climate adjusted provenances of the target species to the end users. So I think this capacity building and likewise providing what they would be needing from this whole spectrum of production to marketing or being able to bring the seeds to the end user would be that in this supply chain or the seed supply chain that needs to be enhanced. Thank you, Dr. Pin.
Thank you. Any questions from the participant? Yeah. Oh, quiet. Okay. No more. Maybe we come back to you later, Prof. Okay.
Sure.
Thank you,
Sure.
Prof, for your excellent presentation. Sure. Okay, I would like to proceed with the next speaker, Dr. Rekha Warrior. Dr. Rekha from ICFRI, Institute of Forest Genetics and Tree Breeding, India. Let me introduce a brief introduction of Dr. Rekha. Dr. Rekha is the head of the Chemistry and Bioprospecting Division, and is now coordinating the environment information, awareness, capacity building, and livelihood program at the ICFRE, Institute of Forest Genetics and Tree Breeding, Coimbatore, India. She has more than 25 years of experience in the field of forest biotechnology. Her contribution includes genetic improvement of species like teak, melia, and bamboo, establishing seed production system for different tropical species, and heading impactful research projects. She is the Assistant National Country Coordinator of APAFRI in India. And then she is also the chair of the APAFRI board and also member of IUCN SSC Western Jet Plant Specialist Group and Seed Conservation Specialist Group. I think Dr. Reka will share with us her presentation on capacity needs and gaps in advancing forest restoration, commitments, and tree genetic resources for sustainable forest and landscape restoration. Now, I would like to invite Dr. Reka to proceed with her presentation. Dr. Reka, thank you. You can share your slide.
Thank you, Dr. Pin.
Yes.
Am I audible?
Yes, audible, and the slide.
And the slides are visible?
Yes, all good. Please.
Okay.
Thank you.
Yeah. So I would like to thank the APAFRI for this opportunity to talk to you on a very pressing issue. Thanks to Professor Ike for laying the introductory discussions on this important aspect. So today I will be speaking on capacity needs and gaps in advancing forest restoration commitments and tree genetic resources for sustainable forest landscape restoration. Mainly I will be focusing on the tree genetic resources, otherwise referred to as the TGRs, which play a foundational role in ensuring that restoration efforts are not only successful in the short term, but also resilient and sustainable in the long run. So I will walk you through the importance of the TGRs, the current gaps that exist there, and what are the key actions that are needed to strengthen the restoration efforts. So as Professor Ike had mentioned a couple of minutes back about how important it is that we focus on the native tree species, what are the efforts that we are required to do. So my talk would mainly focus on those things. Dr. Pin, my slides are moving, right?
Yes, yeah, moving,
Okay.
yes.
So why are tree genetic resources so very important when it comes to restoration aspects? Tree genetic resources, as we all know, are essentially the building blocks of all forest ecosystems and also agroforestry systems. They determine how well the trees can grow, survive, and adapt to changing environmental conditions. In the context of climate change, this becomes even more critical because the forests are increasingly exposed to heat stress, drought, pests, diseases, and without sufficient genetic diversity within them, their ability to cope will be severely limited. The TGRs also directly support livelihoods and nutrition, especially in the rural communities that depend on the trees for food, fuel, and for their income. Most importantly, this is not only relevant for within forests, it is also for the trees outside the forest, which are a major component of all the restoration strategies today. When we talk about productivity, generally, the productivity has always been measured only in terms of timber yield or in terms of biomass. This is a very narrow perspective that we observe in terms of forestry. Today, productivity has to be understood holistically. This would include the ability of the trees to adapt to environmental changes, resist stresses, and contribute to ecosystem services such as carbon sequestration, soil health, and biodiversity conservation. At the core of all these functions lies the genetic diversity. Without this strong genetic foundation, the forest may grow quickly in the in the short term, but they would lack resilience in the long term, because forests always, we look forward to what happens in the future. So here genetic diversity now becomes very important, especially in a situation of the Asia Pacific region, because we the APAFRI and the APAFRI focus more on the Asia Pacific region. This is an incredibly rich region in tree species diversity. Now this is supported by both the natural and the planted forests. There are also strong national institutions which work on forestry and genetic conservation, but despite all these strengths, we see quite a lot of gaps that remain here. For example, many of the species present in this diversity-rich region are underrepresented in most of the conservation and restoration programs. There is also a limited availability of climate-resilient germplasm, which is very much essential for the future conditions. And finally, these TGRs are not fully integrated into the FLR planning and implementation, which reduces the effectiveness of the restoration efforts. I was mentioning about how important tree genetic resources are when you're going in for restoration activities outside of the forest areas, where these TGRs, which are of interest to the farmers if they are fast growing, they are site specific, and they are of economic importance. And this material is not fully integrated into the FLR planning and implementation, which reduces the effectiveness of restoration efforts. So where exactly do these issues happen? One of the biggest constraints that we see today in restoration, in restoration not becoming a success, is mainly because of the lack of adequate and appropriate seed supply, as was mentioned by Professor Ike earlier. So what are the major gaps that we see here? The first is the technical and the information gap. This information we collected through a study. This was done by Enya Bouchard in 2021, where 4 different countries participated: India, Malaysia, Philippines, and Indonesia. And here we try to look into what are the different aspects that hinder restoration effects, especially in terms of the lack of seed. So here the technical and information gaps that we observed were complex genetic identification of different species, lack of standardized evaluation systems, and poor data on seed quality and origin. The next was fragmented supply and climate changes, where we observed a weak integration of informal seed suppliers. So it is not necessarily we have seed suppliers, we do not know who actually is collecting the seed and supplying it, and limited strategies for climate resilient seed sourcing. The third one we observed was no dedicated legal framework or limited political or scientific recognition of the forest genetic resources which could be used for seed for the restoration efforts. And finally, a shortage of trained manpower, funding, and institutional support, indicating inadequate capacity and resources. So as a result of these problems, we find that many of the restoration projects face delays or result in higher costs or in poor outcomes. So when we look into restoring species and what is the extent of genetic diversity that is required for restoring a particular site, we realize we need the right species, the right seed zones, the right seed sources, and the right seed collection practices. When all these are put together, global studies indicate that the projects would be very successful. But this has been a major failure in most of the restoration activities, suggesting a major disconnect between knowledge and practice in restoration planning. So how do we go about it? So for this, Reena from our APAFRI, as a team, she carried out she and her team carried out an evaluation of 159 restoration projects across the globe to see where are we failing. So the question that was asked for the right species are information on how climate change is affecting ecosystems and species distribution. The question for right seed zones are, do you have maps of these seed zones, or do you have provenances of these seeds, the species that way? Do you have the right seed sources, Do you have registries of these seed sources where you can go and collect the material? And do you have right seed collection practices? Meaning to say, do you have a proper certification system for these tree seeds? So if you look at the graph, you would realize that across all the categories, the no responses are consistently high, indicating that there are gaps in the seed system infrastructure. Certification systems are the weakest areas that we see. Even the strongest category of climate change information, where we have 45% available, there is room for more of improvement, and a notable portion of the respondents, almost 30%, are unsure of what is the material you have to use, meaning to say that there is a lack of awareness or transparency. Considering these factors, the APFORGEN as a team, bringing in the different countries that are present here. APFORGEN is a network of 15 member countries of the Asia Pacific region who have been doing a lot of collaborative activities. So two such activities which the APFORGEN did. One is the APFORGES, which is an initiative, an important step towards addressing information gaps on the availability of tree species and their genetic resources. This was a regional collaboration involving multiple countries and experts aimed at improving access to data on tree species. So here 11 organizations and over 50 member countries came together to provide species distribution maps, threat assessment maps, and accessible online tools. Some of the tools were mentioned by Professor Ike earlier. Now we have the Diversity for Restoration tool, we have the My Farm Trees. So such tools are essential for evidence-based decision-making in restoration. Another key initiative of the APFORGEN was a project on strengthening seed supply across the Asia-Pacific region. Here we had partners from Bangladesh, India, Indonesia, Philippines, and Edinburgh. Here we developed seed zone maps for the countries for specific species, 4 species to be specific in each of the countries, totaling 20 species, identifying gaps in seed availability and trying to link seed suppliers with the markets. There was also a collaboration with the OECD, an international framework, using the OECD seed scheme as a model to standardize and improve the quality. Now, this one project helped the countries to try and understand the gaps, to see how we could have registries for the seed source. So I would be talking about those in the coming slides, and what were the problems that we faced initially and how we tried to overcome them. So when we undertook the project, we realized that the problems that we had while assessing the availability of the tree seed sources were, the first one was the existing seed systems prioritized exotic species for timber while neglecting the diverse native species which are actually required for resilient biodiverse ecosystem restoration. The second was, we realized that 47% of the native distribution areas for these valued tree species, especially the native tree species, are highly threatened by overexploitation, habitat conversion, and climate change. We also had many native tree species which have recalcitrant seeds, seed sourcing issues, which cannot be stored for long term, requiring a reliable local year-round source. And we also found crucial seed source mostly lie outside the protected areas. So obtaining those seed sources becomes difficult. So planning in advance was required. A mismatch in planning was required. So the restoration plans fail to incorporate all these aspects into their planning when they plan for a restoration program. Thereby, the availability of tree seed sources for FLRs becomes a failure. So what are the critical assessment factors we need to take a look at here when we are talking about FLRs, the seed supply systems, and how we can assess them? So the first one would be that we map the current landscapes, a sectoral assessment. We map the current landscape by identifying seed sources, evaluating the nursery practices, understanding stakeholder relationships, and trying to identify the bottlenecks in the supply. The next one would be a quality control, where we move a little beyond just height measurements or collar diameter measurements. We try to look into what is the root architecture. Is your species suited to a site? Would the roots be able to plant themselves there in the place? What is the genetic diversity of the material that you are handling? So all these, if we could do at the seedling quality levels, that would be able to support this. We could also promote sourcing from certified or approved seed sources to avoid poor performing unknown germplasm. Thirdly, you could have partnerships between the government, non-governmental organizations, research institutions, and the private sector as a sort of stakeholder collaboration to improve production and distribution networks. Fourthly, you could strengthen the technical skills in the process of seed collection, processing, nursery management, and distribution through capacity building. And finally, through a policy support where you create conducive institutional procedures and regulations to support the scaling up of high quality germplasm. So what do we think could be the essential components of a proper development for an FLR? A structured approach is required to strengthen these three seed systems. The first one would be understanding the current system, wherein we assess the existing seed sources, try to find out what are the existing seed sources and what are the users' needs. Secondly, identifying the technical and institutional improvements that are required. Do we have the necessary technical and the institutional mechanisms to take up such activities? And thirdly, have a proper implementable action plan. So here we try to engage the local actors because they are quite familiar with what their sites are, what are the species that could be introduced there, and improve production and the distribution system sustainably utilizing their efforts. This forms the most important aspect because the local stakeholders have to be actively involved to ensure that your restoration efforts are sustainable. So in this case, where do we actually focus on if we are going for a capacity strengthening? The first two, we can do it. But what about the third one where we talk about capacity strengthening? Capacity strengthening becomes one of the critical components when it comes to FLR. Okay, seed sources are one. We try and ensure that the seed sources are available. But what about transferring this knowledge to the local stakeholders who are fully involved in it? Here, there is a greater need for investment in seed systems to scale up production of diverse and high quality native species involving the stakeholders here. Currently, many of these systems rely on low diversity seed sources, which undermines this resilience. As I mentioned initially, diversity plays a very key role when it comes to the seed systems. So we need to focus on training our stakeholders, imparting them the knowledge that a diversity is required when you are going in for such restoration programs. So shifting towards diversity is essential for long-term success. Next, the infrastructure and technology also plays a key role here. As I mentioned, through our project, which was funded by the UK Darwin, we have tried to develop national seed zone maps. We have tried to facilitate seed sources, not just that which is available within the country, but also that which is available with the stakeholders, so that they also form a part of the entire restoration process. And now, through different apps, through digitization, we try to create supply chains for better traceability of this material. So alongside, we have also tried to train the local stakeholders, particularly in the community-based nurseries. We have tried to develop community nurseries to teach them how to develop nurseries, how to manage this sustainably, and then also improve techniques so that the material that comes out of their nurseries is robust for the process of the FLR. We also try to take in training. We also try to take in better coordination among the stakeholders. That includes both the government, non-government, and also the stakeholders, and try to develop clear standards for seed quality so that when all these are put together, we address the gaps that we have been discussing now to minimize or to reduce the delays and also the costs that have generally been seen whenever we go in for such FLR implementation projects of FLR implementation. So here This is a set of recommendations that has come out of the project that we successfully implemented, as I mentioned, with Bangladesh, Philippines, Indonesia, and with India, where we try to see what happens at the ground level, where are the gaps, and how do we try and address these gaps. So this, I have tried to discuss this in different headings. So the first one that we realized was mapping the seed zones. That is one learning which we obtained from this project. This has come out as a policy brief brought out by Reena and Tobias in 2026, which is available on the net. So the first thing that we mention as a recommendation is mapping the seed zones. So once the seed zones are mapped, they would serve as a guiding light for sourcing and also provide opportunities for engaging the indigenous people and the local communities in the supply. Second one, establishing registries, developing publicly accessible registries. If you would see, Philippines has brought out a registry. In Indonesia already has a registry where they are registering the different seed sources, including that of the communities. India has also created a list of the various seed sources that are available and also the suppliers from whom you can obtain this. So this brings in more of transparency and traceability for the material that is moving across different regions. A third one, enabling registering of the material. Now the governments, the policy makers have their own seed sources. We should also try and encourage to bring in the stakeholders so that you can build simple, accessible mechanisms for the local stakeholders to register their own seed sources which are available on the private and communal land. As I was mentioning, Indonesia has already started this process. Now you try and address the gaps in case we are not available, we do not have sufficient seed material. Then we try to identify where exactly the seed sources are available using niche modeling maps. You try and collaborate with different community forestry groups, see which is the material that is suitable for your locality and try and bring in the material from different places suited to your locality. The next point would be strengthening policy, wherein we try to develop supportive policy and legislative frameworks that stimulate the demand for quality native seed, including restoration mandates and seed quality standards. And finally, you try to bring in different people together, create mechanisms for cooperation such that multi-stakeholder platforms are created, a seedling buyback program is arranged to sustain engagement of and shared responsibility involving the community in all our activities. To conclude, as the chairperson of the APFORGEN and also as a person who has been working in the Asia Pacific region for quite some time, I would request all the members here who are present here, and not just you, as this program is being heard by many around, I would request all the members here to identify the capacity needs, especially specific for your area when you are going in for such restoration efforts. Try and develop technical guidance tools using digital platforms that are already available free of cost, like I mentioned the D4R, and as Professor Ike mentioned, the D4R or the MyFarm trees for maintaining, restoring, and monitoring the genetic diversity of the wild species, which are key for the restoration and successful recovery of an ecosystem. Develop cross-cutting capacity building programs. Whenever we go in for any capacity building program, try to see that we try and strengthen the national capacities for genetic diversity maintenance and restoration, which is a key factor which has been mentioned in the Asia Pacific Forestry Commission meetings also. Try and mobilize resources for implementation, because for such activities the resource that comes in is pretty poor, and also to promote peer learning through South-South cooperation, which brings together all the nations so that we can work together, try to solve common problems together. As we come together as a team, our strengths would be built in better with the learnings from the different countries. So by working collaboratively and by investing in the genetic resources, we would be able to assure that the restoration effects are not only successful but also resilient, inclusive, and sustainable. I once again thank APAFRI for this opportunity to help me to share my thoughts on these aspects and capacity building. and seed stand systems for tree genetic resources for a sustainable FLR. Thank you so much, and back to the Secretariat.
Thank you, Dr. Rekha, for the excellent presentation. Thank you for sharing us a lot of information there regarding on this tree system and the forest genetics. I would like to invite questions from the participants. Any question, please? Look like they understand quite well from what you present. Let me ask one question. Can you share with us what is the status and the challenges in implementing the seed certification system in India? What the status now and the challenges there?
Okay,
Thank you.
so in India, most of the tree genetic resources that I was talking about rests with the government lands. It is the government that owns most of the tree genetic resources. So we have been talking about tree genetic resources. There had been a lot of discussions on these aspects, but initially in 1979, when the OECD came forward to support this process, the awareness on the importance of forest genetic resources was not as good as it was then. So we were not in a position to understand these things. But today we have good awareness on these forest genetic resources. We have had quite a lot of national programs on this. There has been a national program support on the need for conservation and sustainable utilization of forest genetic resources. Now each of those for these departments, we have different states in the country. Each of these states have started realizing the importance of these, and now they have come up with a model for certification. A nationwide program has come up. This is called as Praman, which is our own indigenous certification system, where we try to look into how can we certify the seeds that come out of the seed orchards, be it the seedling seed orchard or the clonal seed orchard or the seed production area or the seed stands. So we have set standards for them now. We also have developed standards for the nurseries which produce these seeds. So from where do they take the seeds? How do they manage the seedlings? So these sort of certification standards have come up. We also have an indigenous registration system in India. Plant varieties are not allowed to be patented. So we have our own indigenous registration system called the Protection of Plant Varieties and Farmers Registration Act, wherein an IP would be provided to that material which we can breed, say as a resilient variety or as a unique variety. So an IP is given to them, and this material is protected within the country. I hope I have answered your question.
Yeah, very clearly, Dr. Rekha. What about, can you tell us about engaging the community around this seed source area? How do you engage them, and then what's the response? Thank you.
Yeah. As of now, we have not, we do have people who collect, but they are not fully aware of the seed sources from where they collect. Like I mentioned to you, it is almost mostly the government which collects it. But now slowly, research organizations also have started creating this sort of seed orchards. We are also slowly moving into community seed orchards where we train the community. We give them genetically diverse material. We help them to establish orchards, and then we try to help them have a tie-up with industries so that the industries can collect this material from those community seed orchards. They are benefited with a buyback program from the industries. This was something which we started about 10 years back, and this has been going on quite successfully.
Yeah, thank you. I think the buyback is very important because it's all about the livelihood and also the income for the community. Any other questions from our participants? Okay. If there's no questions, I would like to thank Prof. Ike and Dr. Rekha. Dr. Rekha,
I'm sorry. Yeah, something
I
I
would like
don't
to
know.
thank both
Something
of
seems to
you.
be wrong. Yeah.
Yeah, I thank both of you for sharing with us the importance of forest seed system, tree genetic resources that are critical in ensuring the success of FLR. And I would like to urge the participants who are interested in this topic to reach out to Prof. Ike and also Dr. Reka, and also member of AFOGEN for this information. And then I would like to also thank all the participants for joining this workshop.
I was mentioning.
Lastly, I look forward to seeing you in the other program of APAFRI in the future. And then thank you. Bye bye.
Thank you.
Thank you, Prof.
Thank you
Thank you
very
a lot.
much.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.
Last.